One killer in your career as an entrepreneur or business owner is going to be burnout. And this is something that I want to talk about in this video because I think it's something that's highly underrated and something that's not talked about enough. And oftentimes the consequences that I've seen with a lot of, I've coached over 300 plus business owners and entrepreneurs, and even in my own journey, this is the number one thing that is literally the killer in the difference between a successful entrepreneur and someone who just has maybe one good year and then ends up quitting or ends up leaving this space. And it's an important thing to talk about because I was thinking about this when I was having a actual one-on-one coaching call with one of my sales reps. He's one of the top performers on this team. This team's making about 250 to 300,000 K per month. So it's a multiple $1 million sales team that I'm coaching right now. And the biggest problem that I kind of just invited him to think about was not him trying to be more disciplined and him trying to be more focused and him trying to be, doing more things. I told him that his biggest problem was he was actually doing too much and that he needs to figure out a way to have some defense in his game, right? Because the way that I invited him to think about it and the way that I invite you to think about it is entrepreneurship, this game of business, is a game of both offense and defense. And just as much as we need to be in that grind, that discipline, working hard, being in the offensive, making new sales, making and growing, and being in that masculine energy and driving growth, we also need to understand how to play defense properly. How to not just have deep work, but deep rest, deep recovery, deep rejuvenation. In fact, when you think about some of the top athletes in the world who've had really long-lasting careers, who are going to be Hall of Famers in their game, like, for example, Tom Brady, Steph Curry, LeBron James, right? These athletes were really good at obviously putting their all on the court and being able to show up and being a top performer, but they were also investing probably millions of dollars in their health. I know LeBron James has spent millions and millions upon dollars on himself, and they were just as good at the defense, meaning their recovery, their health, and really protecting the downside risk. And the biggest risk for you as an entrepreneur is burnout, right? And so this was a sentiment that I was sharing with him. I was like, hey man, you're a younger guy, you're in your early 20s, right? You've had a really good sales year so far. You kind of remind me a lot about yourself, but I'm gonna tell you why you actually have to avoid this one thing. I'm gonna explain here in a second what this one thing is. But I was telling him, if we don't fix this, what ends up happening? If we continue this route where, we're really high performing one day and really on top of the world one day, but then we get taken out because we start getting, a little bit burnt out, what can actually happen to you? And a lot of entrepreneurs who might be, earlier or mid part of their journey, they don't really understand burnout's happening until what? It's too late. Until it's too late. So let me explain, right? Back in 2019 was when I first started my agency. I started my first real business. Beforehand, I was doing things like drop shipping and trying these side hustles. I was from like 2015 to like 2018 for like 3 years. I was always doing some sort of like side hustle or some sort of like business while I was still in college, right? But when I went into full-time entrepreneurship in 2018, there was like this 3-year period, 3.5-year period, I would say, almost 4 years, where I was just like working 70, 80-hour work weeks. I was grinding through it. I was listening to a bunch of Gary Vee and Andy Frisella. I'd wake up early, 5:30, 6 a.m. I'd work late, past like 12, right? I wouldn't have fun on the weekends. I would say no to all my friends. And for me, back in the day, I was justifying it as like, well, this is just a sacrifice it takes to be an entrepreneur, which is true. There is a truth to that, but there's a caveat to it as well. I'll explain here. And that was fine and dandy for like the first year. It started becoming a little bit of a problem I started to notice in like my health and my sleep and just the way that I showed up in my relationship started becoming a problem around year 2. So this was around the end of 2020, early 2021. And then at the end of like 2021 and the early of 2022, I just felt incredibly burnt out. I'd finally achieved some of the financial income goals that I wanted to achieve. I was finally making, 6 figures in my business And at the time, that was a lot of money for me when I was still in my early to mid 20s. But it came at a cost. And I was on red. I was going too far and pushing the line a little bit too far, where, maybe I should have been pushing the line here, and I could have like started to like wean down a little bit and refocus on other areas of my life. But I was like over here. I was like way past the red line. And that's an issue, because if you really think about it, in life, we're not just meant to be entrepreneurs or business owners. We don't have one domain of just like work and business, right? Or wealth. We have multiple domains. And this is the difference between a successful entrepreneur, right? Who's able to have a successful business, make the money, make the wealth that he wants to make. And the difference between being a person who's actually the best version of himself, the best man, right? Because as a man, we actually have multiple domains that we are actually called to conquer. We have domains in our health, we have domains in our relationships, in our spiritual life, right? In our business, in whatever maybe possible other hobby or nonprofit or whatever kind of like side thing that you're doing here. We're also called to do these different things. We're supposed to be multi-disciplined in different domains. And if our identity is only a business owner, which was so true for me at the time, was 100% of my identity was just being a business owner, we actually leave ourselves to a unfulfilling life, one of a lot of stress, one of terrible health, one of failed relationships. These are some of the risks that are kind of like second, third, and fourth order consequences of burnout. Burnout oftentimes is kind of like that first trigger, but the effect that you see, the ripple effects that you start to see in your life, comes down to these different things like a failed marriage, a divorce, friendships that end up being, severed. And you have to ask yourself, because there's no wrong or right. There's a kind of a sweet spot or balance for each person. Everyone kind of has different value systems and different things like that. But I used to be part of this, a leader of this men's mastermind, and that was one of the things that we always talked about, which was a man that is fully aligned in his values, right, to the best full potential, is a master at multiple domains. And as a man, we are called to having these different kind of like seasons in our life. Sometimes we're called to a season of wealth building. Sometimes we're called to a season of relationships. Sometimes we're called to a season of like health or spirituality. And it's on to us to have the internal compass to understand when we're called into one season and then when we must leave another season. And it's through our values that we actually create that internal compass so that we have the clarity on when we need to master one domain, okay, reach it to a certain extent, then go to another domain and conquer that domain and find the balance. Because balance isn't actually like, oh, I need to like do a couple hours on each of these each week or each month. Balance is actually intentional imbalance. I'm going to say that again. Balance is actually intentional balance, which is like for a season, whether it's 3, 6, 12 months, you're called to business and wealth building, and then you've gotten to a certain extent, and then you actually rebalance with intentional imbalance, maybe into your health, because you started to see that you were slipping from the gym, and then you go through a season of 3 to 6 months, cutting and getting to a good shape, right? But if we aren't aware of this balance in our lives, we end up waking up because we've been in a season for far too long, aka a wealth building season. It burns us out, and you wake up at 60 years old and you realize that you're a 10 out of 10 in business and wealth, but you're not married, you don't have kids, you don't have a family, maybe you got divorced, or you're extremely overweight and can't even like enjoy your wealth and income. Or you get to 60 and you realize you have no sort of spiritual life or spiritual connection to a higher being, and there's a lack of fulfillment in your mission, purpose, and values. So those are just some of the risks that I want you to consider, okay? And that's coming from someone that has almost gone to that line too far, where back in 2022, I realized I was not successful in any other domain besides maybe money. I was starting to lose out on my relationships. I started to see like some of my close relationships start to lose that intimacy. I started to see that my health wasn't that great. Like I was an athlete growing up and I was looking at myself in the mirror. I was not happy with the man I was looking at the mirror, right? And my spiritual life with God was just deteriorating. And so what did I do? How did I solve this? And this is kind of what the last few minutes I want you to pay attention to. How did I actually go about solving this? Well, I had to go inward, and this is actually what I shared with my sales rep. I had to go inward to understand, who am I supposed to become? Not what I'm supposed to do, who am I supposed to become? I actually went in a 5 to 6 month sabbatical, went through that journey, went through that process to uncover that. I'm not saying you have to do that, but you do need to take some time, whether it's a weekend, a day, a couple of weeks, a couple of months, maybe it takes longer, to identify who is the best version of me that I need to become. It is through being aligned with your most authentic self that all the answers, all the solutions actually ends up coming. So with that being said, that is my recommendation to you is look inward. Who am I supposed to become? What are the values that I actually care about? What are the different domains that I need to master now? What is the season I'm in? What is the next season maybe I'm being called to? When you start finding the answers to the questions, that's when true fulfillment comes. That's where what I call peace and profits start coming to you. You have the money and you have the peace in your life, and everything aligns with you. So with that being said, that's the quick video. I just wanted to share that with you. I thought I felt very compelled to that after having this conversation with my sales rep, and remind me a lot of myself, and I just wanted to make sure that he didn't go down that same path for far too long. And my encouragement to you is, if you find yourself in this path, please turn around. There's another way. Go that way, right? And in that way, you can actually become the person that you're destined to be. So that being said, this is Larry Inspora, Sales Sensei out. I'll see you in the next video. If you haven't already, subscribe, like this video, and comment. Let's see what you took away. Cheers.